Take a moment now and slow down. Let the noise in your mind settle for a second. Turn inward and notice what you have really been feeling under all of it. Maybe you have felt it lately but could not explain it. A pressure in your chest that appears without warning. A sudden thought of one person that rises out of nowhere. A restless spark under your skin that follows you through the day. That feeling is not random. It is not just imagination. It is a sign that something is moving in your direction, and your deeper self feels it before your mind can explain it. There is a part of you that senses things before words, before proof, before any message arrives. That is why you can feel a shift with this person, before anything clear happens on the outside. The pull in your chest, the one you keep pushing away as hope, may actually be your inner guide telling you this connection is not finished yet. This is how change often begins. Before something important happens in the outer world, a quiet pressure starts building inside. You feel tension, you feel movement, you feel that something is about to break open, even if you cannot name it yet. And that is where you are now. Tiny cracks are forming in the silence. Openings are showing up where there once seemed to be only walls. Your place in this person's life has not disappeared the way you feared. While you were sitting with doubt and trying to make peace with the unknown, something was slowly changing inside them. Their emotional armor, built from fear, pride, and the need to stay in control, has started to weaken. Stay with me, because this part matters. What you feel now is not empty. It is the beginning of movement. During the quiet time between you, they kept their distance, but that did not mean they stopped feeling. On the outside, they may have looked calm, collected, even completely moved on. They may have seemed like someone who had accepted the distance and settled into life without you. But that image was not the full truth. It was a mask, not only for other people, but also for themselves. They needed to believe that stepping back was the smart choice. They needed to tell themselves that distance was safety. Yet as time passed, that mask grew heavier. Underneath it, a silent battle was happening. Night after night, they argued with their own heart. They used logic to defend the silence. They told themselves it was better this way, safer, cleaner, easier. Some of that came from pride, some from fear, some from not knowing how to handle feelings that were simply too strong. And that happens more often than people admit. Sometimes a person pulls away, not because they feel too little, but because they feel too much. Being truly seen can shake someone. It can stir old pain. It can wake fears of losing control, fears of being hurt again, fears of needing someone too deeply. But when a bond is real, logic can only carry the weight for so long. Little by little, the walls they built began to crack. Life without you started to feel flat, duller, missing a color they could not replace. A new awareness began to grow in them. The guarded version of themselves, the careful and controlled version, no longer felt real. It felt like a role. And every time they tried to move farther away, something pulled their thoughts back to you. Not in a small way, in a way that touched their identity, in a way that forced them to feel what they had been avoiding. Keep listening, because this is where the shift gets stronger. They tried to bury those feelings by staying busy. They filled space with people, noise, plans, and distractions. But even then, comparisons slipped in. Thoughts of you came back when they did not want them to. Little memories rose without warning. The life they built to keep their feelings quiet is no longer giving them the numbness it once did. They believed distance would make the bond weaker. They thought silence would slowly lower the intensity. They hoped time would erase your place in their emotional world, but the opposite happened. The longer they stayed away, the clearer their feelings became. You did not fade, you became sharper, more present. They started feeling you in the quiet before sleep, in empty conversations, in crowded places where they still felt alone. That is when something deeper started to form inside them. They began to understand that what existed between you was not ordinary. It was not a passing attraction. It was not something easy to replace. It reached parts of them that no one else had touched. And once that truth becomes clear, a person cannot go back to treating the connection like it means nothing. Their mind may still try to argue, it may still search for excuses, but the heart begins to speak louder than reason. There were nights when they sat alone and replayed moments you may have forgotten, the way you looked at them when they were struggling, the peace your presence brought without effort, the comfort of being around someone who did not ask them to perform. That kind of emotional safety is rare. And once it is gone, the empty space it leaves behind becomes impossible to ignore. They have tried to fill that space. It has not worked. The more they looked for it in other places, the more clearly they saw what was truly there between you. And that realization is changing them from the inside. At first, pride told them they could move on cleanly. Pride said they were stronger than the feeling. Pride said they could shut the door and never look back. But pride has limits. It always meets the wall of real emotions sooner or later. And for them, that wall has arrived. They are starting to see this bond in a different way now. It is no longer something they believe they can turn on or off whenever they want. They are beginning to understand that meeting you changed something in them for good. That is not easy for someone who has spent so much time trying to stay guarded. And while this has been happening inside them, something important has also been happening inside you. Even if you still think of them often, even if part of you still wonders what comes next, you are not standing in the same emotional place anymore. You have changed too. You have grown quieter, stronger, more centered. You learned what it feels like to keep reaching for someone who is not meeting you halfway. You felt the weight of carrying too much of the emotional load alone, and slowly through confusion and silence, you began to bring your energy back to yourself. That shift changed everything. There was a time when your feelings were flowing almost completely toward them. Your mood depended on whether they replied, showed up, or gave you anything to hold on to. But at some point, you became tired of living that way. Not with anger, not with drama, just with truth. Your deeper self knew your peace mattered too, so you gently pulled your energy inward, not because you stopped caring, but because you finally started caring for yourself with the same devotion. That choice altered the energy between you, and this is important, so do not miss it. When you stopped overgiving, the silence started speaking to them in a way your chasing never could. When someone is always pouring attention outward, their presence can become easy to overlook. Not because it has no value, but because it is always there. It becomes part of the background. But when that energy turns inward and becomes calm, the absence of it becomes impossible to miss. That is what they are feeling now. They notice your distance in a way they never could before because your energy no longer carries the same need. It is no longer calling for them, waiting on them, bending toward them. And instead of making the bond weaker, that change has forced them to face what they have truly been losing. This is why they have become more restless. Part of them feels that you are changing. They sense that the version of you who waited, chased, and made yourself smaller is fading. And that creates urgency, because suddenly time does not feel endless anymore. People often do not understand the value of something until they spend enough time without it. And that lesson usually arrives with pain. They are now sitting with the weight of every moment they delayed, every feeling they pushed away, every time fear made the choice for them. For the first time, they cannot easily move around that truth. There is another part to this. Separation does not always destroy a bond. Sometimes it reveals it. Distance makes patterns clear. It shows where fear lives. It shows where someone has lost themselves trying to love. It also shows what each person becomes when standing alone. This time apart changed both of you, but not in the same way. It helped you remember your worth without needing their approval. And it forced them to live without your specific energy in their world. That is why what you are feeling now carries so much intensity. What was buried under avoidance is rising to the surface. They are starting to understand. They do not only miss your attention, they miss your depth, your warmth, the way you understood them without endless explanations. This is not just a passing emotion for them. It is not a few difficult nights and then nothing. It has become steady. It moves through their daily life whether they want it to or not. There are moments when they are doing something ordinary and suddenly a memory of you takes over. A sound, a scent, a word someone says, a certain hour of the day. Something small opens the door, and there you are again. At first, this unsettled them. They wanted to believe they were fully in control of their inner world. They wanted to decide when you crossed their mind and when you did not. But deep feelings do not work that way. The stronger the bond, the more naturally it returns on its own. And they are reaching a point where resisting the connection takes more energy than simply admitting it. The walls they built to protect themselves no longer feel like safety. They feel like isolation. The silence they once defended now feels heavy and hard to carry. It has pushed them into real reflection. From that place they are looking back with new eyes. They remember times when you tried to understand them while they stayed guarded. Times when you offered patience they never fully appreciated. Those memories feel different now because now they can see what was really being offered. Real love often looks simple while it is present. You do not always recognize its depth until it is gone. They are now seeing how rare your presence truly was, the honesty, the steadiness, the emotional depth, the freedom of being with someone who allowed them to be fully themselves. They have searched for pieces of that in other places and keep coming up empty. And every empty search makes your importance clearer. This is why the pressure inside them keeps building, not because they are weak, but because truth ignored for too long becomes louder. And right now, that truth is getting harder for them to escape. They have tried to move on in their mind many times. They have tried to cut the emotional thread, yet every attempt seems to bring them back to you with even more force. That happens because what existed between you was never only surface attraction. Something deep inside them recognized something real inside you. And that kind of recognition does not disappear just because someone decides it should. They may not be able to explain all of this clearly, but they feel the change in you. They sense that you are no longer chasing them in the same way. They sense that you have become more settled within yourself, less anxious, less tied to their response for your sense of peace. And strangely, that is exactly what has made their awareness of you grow stronger. When someone stops forcing love and returns to themselves, their energy changes. It becomes quiet, grounded, strong. You became still. And in that stillness they were left alone with the full weight of their own feelings. Without your urgency to hide behind, there was nowhere left to run. Their thoughts keep circling back, their feelings keep rising. The truth is becoming hard to deny. You matter to them, not casually, not out of habit, not because they are bored or lonely. You matter in a way that changed how they understand connection itself. That is unsettling for someone who has spent so long trying to stay safe, because once you accept how much someone means to you, you also have to face vulnerability, risk, the chance of being hurt. Fear has guided them for a long time. Fear of pain, fear of losing control, fear of being seen too clearly and then left behind. But fear always reaches a limit. There comes a point when avoiding the truth becomes more painful than speaking it. And whether they admit it yet or not, they are moving toward that point now. Watch closely. The silence is no longer empty. It is becoming too loud to ignore. Every day they stay disconnected. The pressure grows. Every time they try to push the feeling down, it comes back with more force. That is why the energy around this connection has felt so intense lately. Something inside them is preparing for change. Not fake change, not forced words, real emotional recognition. The kind that slowly rearranges how a person sees love, loss, and their own life. They are beginning to understand that losing you would not just mean losing another person, it would mean losing a part of themselves that only this bond brought to life. That realization changes people. It does not stay small. And even if they have not acted on it yet, their heart is moving toward a moment when silence no longer feels possible. The more distance they create, the clearer your absence becomes. This has formed a painful conflict inside them. One part still wants to stay hidden behind old walls. Another part keeps imagining what it would feel like to reach out. They play scenes in their head, what they might say, how you might answer, whether too much time has passed, whether the door is still open. Those thoughts keep circling, and what once felt easy to avoid now carries urgency. There are moments when they come very close to sending a message. Moments when the pressure inside rises so high that the silence almost breaks by itself. Then fear steps in again and stops them at the edge. But fear is weakening. Slowly, steadily, day by day, the truth inside them is becoming heavier than the safety those old defenses once gave. The detached part of them is beginning to fall apart. Underneath all the resistance, they already know something simple and powerful. No one else touched them the way you did. No one else gave them that same mix of depth, recognition, and emotional safety. That knowledge has changed the meaning of everything. What once seemed uncertain now feels deeply important. What they once avoided now follows them everywhere. Clarity creates movement, even when it begins in silence. Growth like this does not always happen in obvious steps. There are still fears inside them, still old habits, still truths they have to sit with and accept. But something major has already shifted. They are no longer standing outside of these feelings, deciding whether to engage with them. They are inside them now. They feel them fully. And once a person reaches that stage, silence becomes much harder to keep. Both of you have changed too much for the old pattern to continue forever. Something more honest is trying to come through. All the quiet, all the pressure, All the inner reflection has brought this connection to a point where something must move, because real feelings cannot stay buried forever. Sooner or later, they search for air. The silence that once felt manageable to them now works against them. The distance they created to feel safe now feels lonelier than honesty ever could. This is often the last stage before real change. For a long time they believed avoidance would make the bond fade on its own, that if they waited long enough the feelings would weaken naturally. But every attempt to disconnect has shown them how deep the roots really are. They are standing face to face with something they cannot easily walk away from. You changed them in a lasting way, and once someone sees that another person has shifted how they feel love and closeness, they cannot fully return to who they were before. This has started a true awakening in them. They are beginning to see that the peace they wanted was never going to come from running. It was always going to come from truth, from honesty, from facing what they feel instead of fighting it. And if you have felt that inner pull lately, there is a reason. Something real is moving beneath the surface, even before it becomes visible. There are moments now when they feel very close to breaking the silence. Moments when the pressure becomes so strong that reaching out feels almost unavoidable. They replay possible conversations in their mind. They imagine what they would say if fear were not there. They think about how your voice might sound, how your response might feel. They keep circling the same edge, and slowly fear is losing its power, because there comes a point when the pain of losing someone becomes greater than the fear of being emotionally open. That is the edge they are nearing. Still, there may be moments ahead that test you, moments when patience feels hard, moments when your emotions rise again and ask for your attention. But your intuition already knows something your mind is still learning to trust. Something genuine is unfolding below the silence. The walls are lowering, the fear is weakening. The truth is speaking more loudly than before. This bond is moving toward a turning point. But hold on to this with both hands. Do not lose yourself while waiting for someone else to wake up to what they feel. Keep choosing your own peace. Keep building your own life. Keep honoring your own worth every day. Keep becoming more grounded, more honest, more whole. Because the deepest lesson in all of this was never only about whether they return, it was about you reaching a place where your value is so clear to you that no one's silence can take it away. That is the real transformation. That is the shift that changed everything. The moment you stopped chasing, the energy between you changed. The moment you came back to yourself, they were left to face what your absence really means. This is no longer only about confusion. It is about clarity growing on both sides. And that kind of clarity changes the story. One person is learning to stop running from what they feel. The other is learning to protect their peace without closing their heart. And when those two things happen at the same time, everything can change. So if you have been sensing this pull, trust it. If your inner voice has been whispering that something is shifting, listen. If your heart has been noticing movement under the silence, you are not imagining it. Something real is taking shape. But whatever happens next, remember this. You are already becoming whole. Not because someone finally chooses you, not because a message arrives on the exact day you hoped, not because every question gets answered right away. You are becoming whole because you stopped leaving yourself behind while trying to love someone else. And that kind of healing changes everything that follows. Sometimes the quiet before something meaningful is not empty at all. Sometimes it is the space where the deepest transformation is happening in both people at once, hidden just under the surface. So keep your heart open, but keep your feet under you. Keep your peace. Keep your center. Let what is real come toward you without abandoning yourself to make it happen. If this connection is meant to move forward, it will do so through truth, not through force, through honesty, not through chasing, through growth, not through fear. And if the next step comes, let it meet the version of you that now knows your own worth. Let it meet the version of you that no longer begs for clarity because you have found it within yourself first. That is the new energy here. That is the new look of this story. Not desperation, not confusion, not waiting in the dark, but quiet power, clear value, deep feeling, and a heart that remains open without breaking itself to be chosen. If you want, I can also turn this into a more emotional YouTube voiceover version with even stronger retention lines while keeping the same meaning and length.